I think we are connected and we are live, so I just double check here on the left. We had a little problem at the beginning. Yeah, we are live and we are working. So the problem at the start, I did not share the screen on Facebook Live and I had to restart and reconnect again. So thank you very much for your patience and thank you for waiting and thank you for attending the class. The structure today will be very similar from the other classes, and that is my intention. So if you are new, welcome to the class. If you are new, and if you have attended the class before, welcome again, and I hope you are having a good morning. Normally every morning I post on Instagram, but this morning it was impossible because I have a little restriction. I cannot post until Friday because yesterday I was commenting on some posts and I think the limit is 30 posts on Instagram and maybe I exceeded the number, so I have a little delay with Instagram. That is the reason I did not post this morning, in case you were wondering. Okay, so I'm going to show you some information for this morning. So happy Wednesday, of course, to everybody. This is from Thailand, and I think it's Sukhsant One Foot in Thailand. That's the significance of Happy Wednesday. So they're just some different languages. Portuguese. For me, it's very interesting. The quarta feira, so it looks like 4. I don't understand the significance of that, but thank you very much again for everybody for attending. I hope we have no problem with the connection. I hope we have no problem with technology, and I hope you enjoy the class. If you want to participate and to connect with the Zoom meeting, here is the code here for Zoom, and for me it's a very good idea if we have 3 or 4, at least 3 or 4 participants in Zoom, because this way Zoom will not disconnect, because I think if the meeting is inactive it's possible it disconnects. So maybe at least 3 or 4 people would be perfect. If you want to connect, that would be very good. Also on Facebook Live it's possible as well. So that's the plan. We will continue with a similar structure today, and I want to show you also something interesting. This is the statistics, and I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. So this is the location of people who attend the class. So the majority of people are in England, probably obviously from different countries, maybe Brazil, Romania. A lot of people are in Dublin, again probably from Brazil and from Spain, and Madrid, Sao Paulo, Rio, Andalusia, a lot of Spain, a lot from Thailand, and Romania at the bottom in Prahova County. So we have a mix of different people, and for this reason the class maybe is interesting, and we have people with lots of different languages. So I hope you understand the class, and I hope you understand me, because people have lots of different abilities. In relation to the Zoom meeting, in the event section every morning I post the link. So if you want to search the event section and the event in Facebook, you can connect directly to the link, because that's probably easier than typing in the numbers individually. Okay, so the link directly is in the post in the Facebook event for today's class. Okay, so the plan for today is the introduction. So we have a grammar introduction every morning, and today is the same, and we will try to reduce the time with the grammar explanation, because I know some of you are very familiar, but it is very important today. So the grammar explanation is first. Second, we have an article, probably a little easier, a little more general compared to yesterday. Yesterday's article was probably very advanced, the review from the movie, and today the article is probably more understandable, more direct and clearer. But for this reason it's very interesting as well, and very important, and still we have a lot of very important vocabulary to look at, and a lot of interesting expressions and interesting grammar structures from this article. Okay, after the article it's possible an exercise in relation to grammar. The British Council website is very good in relation to grammar, and today possibly we will look at one exercise in relation to grammar. Okay, the difference between I used to go, get used to doing, or to be used to doing. So there's a small difference between the three, and today I have a little exercise to test and to show this lesson. Okay, phrasal verbs. I have a list of phrasal verbs. I want to continue with the phrasal verbs and the idioms. You can see, and speaking is possible as well. If you want to participate during the class, please connect with the Zoom meeting and we can practice some speaking, because this week we have practiced with some people and it has been really, really good, and the intention is to continue this way. Okay, we also have a letter. So Maria from Toledo has sent a letter in relation to writing. So for me this is fantastic. It's a very good opportunity to show everybody some corrections in relation to writing, and if we have time today we will look at the writing. And again, if you want to send me some writing, you can send it to me and I can try to correct and give you some advice for your writing, because it's very important. Okay, so that's the meeting code for the Zoom, and again, if you want to connect, please connect. Okay, so I will share the screen now and then I will show you the introduction document and we can begin, because here, this document, again, you're very familiar, I think, with this document on the left. And for me, there are three very, very important areas in my classes, and the structure, the foundation of my class is in relation to three areas. Okay, so the first area is use of English, and the second area are tenses, and the third area is just grammar topics in general. You can see in yellow. Okay, so first we will begin with the explanation for the use of English, and I will make the screen a little bit bigger so you can see. And also I just want to show you some information here. So social media, as I said, on Instagram it's impossible for me to post until Friday because of the little restriction, but if you want to connect and to like and follow the Instagram page, it's possible here with the information, and the same with Twitter and YouTube. The content is practically the same, except obviously Instagram has more pictures, and it would be fantastic if you want to participate and to connect and to follow the account there. Okay, also we have, I think, the dog. So you know my dog already, you're very familiar, and it's possible the dog may make some noise during the class, but that's the picture of the beautiful dog, so you recognize when the sound comes. Okay, so English, again, so the use of English is for me a very, very important area. Okay, because accents, we have a lot of different accents around the world. We have an accent in particular in Ireland, an accent in different parts of England, United States, Australia, New Zealand. So for you learning English, the accents are very, very hard to identify, and they're very hard to understand. And I have a lot of sympathy for you learning English, because really it's extremely difficult to understand perfectly everybody when they speak. And I think this is because of different accents. So accents are really, really important. And for example, in Ireland, and possibly with me, I have some particular issues in relation to accents. For example, the U is possibly very strong for me. Must, Dublin, butter. But phonetically, the rule phonetically in the book with the U is probably Dublin, butter, bus. So just be careful with my pronunciation, particularly in relation to U. Also the TH, it's possible my pronunciation has the pronunciation of a D. For example, should be this, that, these, those, Thursday. But for me, sometimes it's like D. This, that, these, those, Thursday. So the TH in Ireland, and maybe for me, is sometimes an issue that's important for you to identify. Also, the OU is possibly very strong. For example, house, mouse, for me sometimes it's very stressed and very strong, but phonetically in the book maybe it's a little softer. Okay, so just that's one example of the importance of accents. So people ask me are very worried. When you learn English, you're very conscious of your accent. But for me, I would not worry too much. I don't think it's a big problem. Oh, perfect. I have one thing I want to do in relation to the invitation. So I want to make sure everybody is mute. This is a selection, okay? So I want to mute everybody. Perfect. So that is the last thing I wanted to do, and thank you. I think that's Fanny for connecting. We spoke last week from Peru. So accents are very, very important, and they're a big part to understand English, okay? Phrasal verbs, honestly, for me, this is really a big important area to study and to learn. And every day I mention the importance of phrasal verbs, but in reality we have thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of phrasal verbs. And if you are not familiar with the concept of the phrasal verb is a verb and a preposition. It's possible literal significance, but it's also possible a double or a second completely different significance. But we use phrasal verbs all the time, every moment, every day. They're very particular to English. I don't think they exist exactly the same in other languages, but phrasal verbs are so important because we use them every moment, every day. And this is the reason I think it's so important to mention to you phrasal verbs, and really I recommend that you analyze a lot the phrasal verbs, because majority of people, in my opinion, have a good foundation of grammar. You understand, I think, in general grammar concepts, but for me the phrasal verbs are worth learning a lot because they're the key, in my opinion, to learning English. Also, subtitles are available for me during the class with Facebook Live. If you want to select the subtitles and the captions, they can help follow the class. They are not 100% correct, but the majority of the subtitles are correct. If you want to catch my accent, and maybe Facebook is very confused sometimes with my accent, so that's a possibility. And another good example, idioms. So idioms for me equally are important like the phrasal verb. Again, idioms, we have thousands, tens of thousands of idioms, and we use expressions or idioms all the time in conversation. Very typical for family, very typical for friends, and they are so important to really master and to really learn English perfectly. So idioms and phrasal verbs for me, I really think are the most important areas for you to understand native conversation, to understand movies, to understand series. Really, phrasal verbs and idioms are the most important, and this is the reason they are top of my list. Okay? So, of course, conversation and pronunciation is very, very important, and to really improve, to really use English, you need to practice your conversation. You need to try to find somebody to speak to, and you need to try to practice speaking English regularly, just for your brain and for your process. So for me, it's a very important activity, of course. Pronunciation. English, we have a lot of irregular phonetics, we have a lot of irregular pronunciation, and during the class I try to help and identify the issues and the topics in relation to the pronunciation, because we have a lot of important pronunciation issues, and sometimes it's not exactly phonetic, sometimes it's irregular. Okay, very good. So honestly, again, use of English, this category, this section for me is the most important, because grammar, you understand, I think you have a good foundation, but use of English again is probably, in my opinion, the most important area to focus on and the most important area to really learn and to study. It will help you improve very quickly. Okay? Tenses. So every language we have different tenses. If you speak Japanese, if you speak Thai, if you speak Romanian, if you speak Portuguese, Spanish, you speak in the present, you need to speak in the past, in the future, so you need to be familiar with the concept of time when you speak. So in English we have a few concepts in relation to the grammar explanation. We have the simple, present simple, one action you do in the present, past simple, one action you did in the past and it's completed, future simple, one action you will do in the future. Okay, the construction of the future is two possibilities, will and the verb, will go, will eat, will have, will drink, and the second possibility, going to eat, going to drink. They are the two possibilities for the future. The past simple is problematic because we have a lot of irregular verbs in the past simple, and this is extremely challenging and extremely difficult for you to learn all the irregular verbs in the past simple. So it's very, very difficult, the past simple, and that's the concept of the simple. The next concept is the continuous. In English we have the present continuous, one action you do continuously in the present. For example, I am speaking, I am drinking, I am eating. The construction is the subject, the verb to be, and the ing, the gerund. So I am eating, I am drinking, I am speaking. The future is very similar. I will be eating, I will be drinking, I will be talking. And the past continuous has a similar concept, except it's the past with the verb to be. I was eating, I was drinking. So that's the simple and the continuous. Now we have the perfect, and there are three more or less tenses important for the perfect. We have the present perfect, we have the past perfect, and we have the future perfect. The present perfect is the period in the past, it's completed and it's finished, but the action is related and relevant to the present. The construction is the subject, the extra auxiliary verb have, and the participle of the verb. The participle is the third column, tercera columna, go, went, gone, for example. So that's the perfect. And one example is I have eaten my breakfast, because it's finished, it's completed, but it is related and it is relevant to now, because now I am not hungry. The food is still with me. That's the technical importance and example and relevance of the present perfect. The past perfect is usually the period in the past before another action in the past simple. Okay, and the construction is the subject, the extra verb have in the past, had, and the participle again. So I had eaten my breakfast before my friend contacted me. So that's the difference. Very, very little difference. And in reality, the past perfect, the present perfect, and the past simple, sometimes you can select one or two and they're very similar, but you need to be familiar with the theory. It's possible in the future as well. We have the future perfect. I will have eaten my dinner when my friend will arrive. Same idea. Okay? And they, for me, are the most common and the most important tenses in English. And during the class, I mentioned a lot about the tenses, and I try to identify in the class the different tenses because they are so common and so important. The conditionals, we have a lot of theory in relation to the conditional. We have the zero conditional, first conditional, second conditional, third conditional, mixed conditional. And in the book, the theory is very heavy and the theory in the book is very strict, but in reality, it's a little more flexible, and in reality, in conversation, in my opinion, it's less strict. Basically, it's related to if. Okay, so the different tense and if. If it rains today, I will go to the city. If I met my friend yesterday, I would have spoken about the football. Okay, so it's the tense and related to if and maybe hypothetical situation. That's the area of the conditional. It's very important, and again, it's probably a difficult area to master. I really believe it's a tricky area to understand perfectly. Okay, the active and the passive is a tense that you need to be familiar with. The difference between the active, which is the subject, the verb and the object, and the structure of the passive, where you change the position and also introduce an extra verb to be. Okay, so I drink the milk and the milk is drunk by me. So that's the active and the passive. So just to be aware and to be conscious of the possibility of the active and the passive. Okay. Grammar. So other grammar topics that are basic and the foundation of English. For example, the substantivo in Espanol in English is the noun. So a noun in English is a person, a place, or a thing. And here is an example of my pronunciation of the OU. So maybe I say noun, but it's possible noun. So there's different pronunciations for the OU, but the idea is the same. The idea of a noun is a person, a place, or a thing. And jacket, hat, car, table, man, woman, light, substantivos, nouns, nouns, nouns. Every noun you need an article. And in English we have two articles. We have the indefinite article and we have the definite article. The indefinite article is a. Pronunciation is possible a or a, no problem. For example, house, a house, a house. Same significance, possible slightly different pronunciation. The definite article is the house. So article, substantivo in Espanol, noun in English. The adjective, the function of the adjective is to describe the noun, and the position of the adjective is before the noun. So the house, the big house, the small house. The position of the adjective normally in English is before the noun, and this is different compared to Portuguese, and this is different compared to Spanish as well. The idea of countable and uncountable is very important in English. The noun, is it possible to count the noun, or is it impossible to count the noun? This is important in relation to how much and how many. So how many is in relation to countable nouns, and the idea of countable and uncountable is, for example, a pen. 1 pen, 2 pens, 3 pens. A pen is countable. House, 1 house, 2 house, 3 houses, countable. So they are countable. But water, it's impossible to count water. 1 water, no, not really. 2 waters, it's impossible. We count 1 bottle, 2 bottles of water, 3 bottles. But water, we do not count. So this is uncountable, and that is important in relation to how much. How much water do you want? How much chocolate do you want? How much time do you have? Uncountable. So that concept is tricky, but you need to understand the concept at the beginning. Okay? The adjective we spoke about, and the adverb, well, in relation to the adjective we have comparative and superlative. So also the adjective, you need to be familiar with the comparative and the superlative. I am happy, but he is happier than me, but she is the happiest. So that's the comparative and the superlative, and that area is important also. The adverb, the function of the adverb is to describe the verb. So the verb to drink, to eat, to walk, to run. Adverb, quickly, slowly, happily, rapidly. We have a lot of adverbs. The general rule, the adverb ends in ly. Quickly, slowly, fastly, softly, ly. So that's the general rule with the adverb, and the function of the adverb is to connect with the verb. And I said fastly, but I think that's an error. I think we only say fast. It's irregular. So the general rule is ly. Okay, so quickly, slowly, softly. Modal verbs. So again, this is very particular area to English. Modal verbs. We have a lot of modal verbs in relation to English, and you can see the list here. Can, could, may, might, shall, should, ought to, and must. So first, must is obligation, and again the U for pronunciation. In Ireland maybe it's must, a little strong, but phonetically it should be must. Okay, it's obligation. You have no choice. You must collect the children. You must do the homework. You must eat your dinner. It's obligation, and you have no choice. It's the same to say have to. You have to collect the children. You have to eat your dinner. Must and have to have the same significance, and they're really flexible. You can use them anytime you want, so there's no real difference, just different origins. Okay, should is for recommendation and for advice. So my recommendation to you, you should watch the movie, you should visit Dublin, you should contact your friend. It's my recommendation and my advice. Okay, and ought to is the same, but here is a good example of the pronunciation difficulty. So the G in this case is silent. The pronunciation of the G is silent, and we have other words as well with the GH. So for example, although is another example of the GH, and the G is silent. So yesterday we looked at the CH, but today we also look at the GH. So here the G is silent, although, and in this example as well, with the modal verb ought to, it's silent. So this is a good example of the phonetics in English. So it's a little more formal and a little more polite. You ought to watch this movie is very formal, very polite. You ought to go to the cinema, very formal and very polite. Prepositions. So prepositions are a big part of English, and again, I think it's an extremely important area to master, an extremely important area to control the prepositions, particularly for other speakers. So obviously for natives it's very easy and it's very normal for me, but for you it's very, very important to understand the idea and the different significances of the prepositions. Basically, the prepositions are related to movement, direction and position. So imagine we use direction every moment, we use movement all the time, and we use position all the time. So prepositions are so important for English. And again, I say phrasal verbs are maybe the most important, idioms are also very important, and prepositions are very, very, very important, particularly from Spanish to English and possibly Portuguese to English. So for example, in, on, at, to, under, over, we have a lot of prepositions and they are flexible and they are very problematic. So you need to pay a lot of attention to the phrasal verbs and the prepositions. So for example, position, on the floor or on the table, under the table, over the table, below the table, beside the table, next to the table. We have a lot of prepositions. Speak, direction, to you, travel, direction, travel to Dublin. So prepositions are key, and during the class I try to identify and try to show the importance of the prepositions. So really, really important. The next area is a common confusion, very, very common confusion between the object pronoun. So the subject, this is very technical, the subject pronoun is I, you, he, she. The subject pronoun is at the beginning of the sentence and the object pronoun is usually at the end. So I give the chocolate to you. That's the object pronoun. So the list is very important. We also have possession, possession adjective, my hat or chocolate, my chocolate, your chocolate, his chocolate, her chocolate. The masculine and the feminine is very, very important in English compared to Latin languages. So his chocolate, her chocolate. But then the possession of pronoun. The chocolate is mine. The chocolate is yours. The chocolate is his. The chocolate is hers. And particularly in relation to the masculine and the feminine, it's very, very confused when people speak English. And again, it's a big area to master and to control. So really, I think 3 areas that are very, very common with errors are phrasal verbs, prepositions and pronouns. So those 3 areas for me are very frequently confused when you speak English and very frequently with errors when people speak English. So I recommend that you pay attention to that area and try to master, because I think if you understand this, you will eliminate a lot of your errors. Okay? Suffixes and prefixes is a big help in my opinion. So to analyze the suffix and the prefix of a word is a big help and a big clue to recognize the form of the word. Is the word a verb? Is it adjective? Is it noun? Is it adverb? Usually the suffix is the indication of the form. For example, ance suffix is usually substantivo or noun. The importance, noun. So usually ance is noun. ize is usually verb, infinitive. And remember, infinitive is to eat, to go, to drink. But ize with the suffix is usually infinitive, to realize, to fantasize, to monetize. So that's usually the suffix for the verb infinitive. able is the usual suffix for adjective. Manageable. Okay, sometimes it's irregular, incredible, IBLE, but generally ABLE the suffix is the adjective. ly is usually the suffix for the adverb, quickly, slowly, softly. Pre is before, pre-match, pre-event, pre-class. Anti is against, anti-coffee, anti-tobacco, anti-smoking. And the negative is also irregular. It's possible impossible, and it's possible unbelievable. So sometimes the prefix for irregular adjective is irregular. Okay, sorry, negative adjective is irregular. Good, and then you can see some other topics that are very important as well, and during the class I try to explain them. Writing is a big area for sure, and today we have the example from Maria. Maria sent some writing, and it's an idea today to correct the writing, and I'm very excited to show the little corrections, and it's a very good activity for you to practice your writing, and you can send the writing to the class and I can help and correct your writing. It's a very, very good activity, and you will see the corrections, and you will see the improvement, and you will see the advantage and the benefit for writing. So it's very important. And exam preparations are very popular. The Cambridge exams, first certificate, advanced certificate, proficiency, IELTS exams are very, very popular, very important, and I hope I can help with people prepare. I think particularly in Spain they're very popular to be a civil servant. Civil servant in English is like a government worker, and I'll write the word here, a civil servant, because in Spain the exam oposiciones are very, very common and very demanded. So the English exams are very valuable in relation to the oposiciones in Spain, in Andalusia, in Madrid, in all the regions, because I know we have a lot of people from Andalusia today. So thank you so much for connecting, and the English exams are very important for you and for everybody, and during the class I try to help with all the grammar, which is the same for the exams. Okay, so that is the introduction for today, and again, every day it's a very, very important activity to explain the grammar at the beginning, because now you are more familiar with the concept of phrasal verb, idiom, past perfect, present perfect, continuous, modal verb, preposition. You are very familiar with the term, because during the class I use the terms a lot and I mention the terms a lot. So for this reason you have to be very clear and very conscious and very aware of the technical structures, because they are the key to really understand the class. Okay, now I have an article. So today's article is a little better and a little clearer compared to yesterday, because yesterday's article was a review from a movie and very difficult article last week. Today's article is more direct, it's clearer, and I hope it's more understandable. Okay, so here's the headline: Mask, gloves, cake. Hungarians bake to keep ambulance staff going. So the story is from Hungary, and the people in Hungary are baking, they're making food for the staff, the workers of the ambulance to continue. Okay, so it's just a little topic, and we can analyze the vocabulary. So first I will practice the pronunciation, and I will read the text for pronunciation, and after the paragraph I will return and analyze the vocabulary and analyze the expressions. Okay, remember, with the Zoom meeting, if you want to connect and you need the code again for Zoom, this is the code and the pass ID if you want to connect with Zoom. Again, I hope you are able to capture the picture, and remember, before the class, in the section for the event on Facebook, every morning I put the link for Zoom in the event section every morning on Facebook. Okay, so that's possible. Okay, so first I will read the text and we will practice the pronunciation, and then after I will return to the explanation. So, a very, very difficult word to begin. Szentendre, Hungary. Hungarians are baking for ambulance workers across the country, coping with a new surge in COVID-19 infections after the founder of an online cookery group asked a friend in the service how she could help. Okay, so one paragraph and some very important topics. Here's a quotation. Before I could finish, she said, "Oh, we would love some cakes," Esther Harmat said of the conversation that launched the nationwide movement. Okay, so hopefully you understand more or less some very important vocabulary. And the final paragraph, they often, technically the pronunciation here, the T with the rule, the grammar rule, the T is silent. So the best pronunciation here is often. The T is silent in the theory, but in reality it's very typical to hear often. But really the rule is the T is silent, often. So they often do rounds dressed in full protective gear, and they can hardly sit down to eat in a normal way. But the cakes are something they can take on the road. Very, very good. Okay, and here now we have the analysis. So mask is obviously for your face, and there is a verb to mask a problem. So a mask, obviously for the virus, it's necessary to wear a mask, but it is possible a verb to mask the problem. So if you have a problem, you have a difficult problem, and you want to hide or to cover the problem, it's possible to mask the problem. So it's a metaphor in relation to cover or to hide. And another example, an idiom, his mask has slipped. So remember, the verb to slip is like water. You're walking and you slip. It's a dangerous situation. The adjective is slippy. The two possibilities, the floor is slippy or the floor is slippery. Okay, so the adjective is slippery or slippy. And more complicated, we have slippers. So slippers are for your feet when you are in your house in the evening to relax. You wear the shoes for your feet that are comfortable, but they're not shoes, they're slippers. So the verb is to slip because you put your foot, you slip your foot in, number one. Again, with water, you're walking on the street and you slip. So the adjective is slippy, the floor is slippy or the floor is slippery, two possibilities. Okay, and here we can see the example before. So his mask has slipped. This is a very famous metaphor and a very famous idiom. So for example, a politician, I don't like to, obviously everybody criticizes politicians, but I'll just use an example. So the politician has the public face, the public persona, and maybe one moment his action is bad. So the people say his mask has slipped, and you can really see the character, you can really see the true person because his mask has slipped. So it's a metaphor in that sense for every profession and for every person. And again, the verb is typical as well. To mask a problem is very common as well, to mask a problem. And I think they are the most common and the most typical. But also it's possible a person, if the person is slippery, that's a little negative and it's like not honest. Obviously honest, clear, direct. And if the person is slippery, it's a little like a snake. So you cannot trust the person if they're a little slippery. It's possible, adjective for person. Okay, not very common, but it is possible, a slippery person. And the significance is that the person is maybe dishonest. Okay, so obviously a little negative, and but very important. So mask is important. Gloves are when you are cold, you wear the gloves. We have a metaphor as well. The gloves are off. This is a famous metaphor and probably related to boxing, because boxing you have the gloves, and the expression is when the gloves are off, it's more dangerous and it's a real serious fight. So if two people are having an argument with a comment and one person says a really, really nasty, a really bad comment, it's possible to say the gloves are off. So now it's a real horrible situation. It's a horrible argument. So the gloves are off is an idiom. And the significance is now it's a really nasty argument, a nasty moment, nasty argument. And the adjective nasty is very bad, very negative, very cruel. Okay. And again, yesterday we explained the difference between the nation and the nationality. So Spain, you are from Spain, you are from Romania, you are from Thailand, you are from Brazil, but you are Spanish, you are Thai, you are Romanian, and you are Brazilian or Portuguese. So there's a big difference between the nation and the nationality. So in this case, Hungary is the nation and Hungary is the country. And you can see my pronunciation with the U is possible Hungary, but in reality it's Hungary. So that's one example of pronunciation and the accent. So the country is Hungary and the person is Hungarian. So that's a good example of the importance of the nationalities and the difference, because every country has a different name for the country and the nationality. I am from Ireland, but I am Irish. So very, very important vocabulary. And also, of course, very similar to the pronunciation Hungary. Tengo fam in Espanol. So I am hungry is similar, but obviously completely different. So I am hungry and then Hungary. So there's a little difference in the pronunciation. Also, in relation to Hungary, you need to be very clear the difference between Hungary and angry. So this is a typical confusion. Hungry, angry. Very, very different. And you need to be very clear with the pronunciation. Hungry and angry. So angry is like very crazy, very mad. You are not happy. But hungry is related to food. But of course, Hungary is the country. So you can see the challenge and you can see the problems sometimes with pronunciation. But obviously in the context, you will understand. The next verb is to bake. Okay, and the verb to bake is related to food. And now I want to show you some typical verbs, some typical vocabulary in relation to food. You can say to bake, to boil, to grill, to fry. They're the most typical verbs. To boil, to grill, to fry, and they are the most common. And the situation to bake is maybe in the oven, the horno. You put the cake in the oven and you bake. Boil is typical with water. So you have the water and the egg, the hot water, and you boil the water. To grill is like the object with the ring and the iron and then the heat. That's to grill. And to fry is typical with the pan. Okay, so to fry is with the pan, and to boil is with the pot, and to grill is maybe, well, it's the same substantive. We say the grill is the substantive as well. Okay, so just important vocabulary for sure. And in relation to weather, you can say I am baking. So if the weather is very hot, obviously very unusual in Ireland, but if the weather in Brazil is 38 degrees, it's possible to say I am baking, I am boiling, and I am frying. So yes, you can use them in metaphor situations for yourself. I am baking, I am boiling, I am frying, and it means you are really, really hot because of the weather. Okay. Also, the verb to grill is possible in the situation to investigate somebody. So if you grill somebody, you investigate somebody because there's a lot of pressure, a lot of heat, and that's the verb to grill somebody. It's a significance to investigate somebody. Very common in conversation, and to ask a lot of questions. And very, very, I hope you understand the context. I hope you understand the explanation. And to grill someone is the typical example, to ask a lot of questions. And I think that's the most common use of grill. But in this situation, it's to keep going. Okay, so that's the connection here, to keep going. So food keeps me going. Coffee keeps me energetic. Coffee keeps me going. So that's the structure, to keep somebody going. And your friend has a problem and you try to help, you try to advise, you speak and speak and speak, and you keep is the significance, maintain. You keep your friend going. Okay, so that's the structure. Keep the electricity working, maintain the electricity functioning. Okay, so very, very good vocabulary. So one simple sentence, but we have a lot of explanations in English here. And also, I suppose a grill, I'm thinking for the car. In the car, it's possible to grill. You know the front of the car, the very big car like a truck. It's possible the front of the truck has the metal object, So the metal object is the grill of the truck. That's possible as well. And maybe with the teeth, if you have braces, it's possible to say you have their grills. Not very common, but that's just another example of the context. Okay. And to fry, okay, pan. Yeah, I think that's all the vocabulary for that. The second page, Hungarians are baking. So this is an example. Hungarians are the subject. This tense, so what do you think is the tense of this sentence, are baking? This is an example of the verb to be plus the gerund. So this is an example of the present continuous. It's something they are doing in the present continuous. For ambulance workers, so the verb is to work, and you need to be very clear the difference between work and job. This is a typical question. What is the difference between work and job? And I'm going to try to explain. So basically, the verb is to work. That's the rule. The verb basically is to work, and the substantive is a job. That's the basic difference. Okay, so I work in the morning, I work as a doctor, I work as a teacher. Work is the verb and the job is the substantive. So it's possible to say my job is a teacher, my job is a doctor, and work is the verb. But it is more confusing because work is possible verb and it's also possible substantive as well. And this is the challenge. Okay, so work is the verb. You work, I work, he works, she works. But my job is a doctor, my profession. But I have a lot of work is possible also with the substantive. And this is the reason for the confusion. I have a lot of work is the substantive in this case, or the noun. Okay, so a lot of people ask this question, and it's a typical confusion and a typical problem. So you need to be aware and you need to be conscious of my explanation that the work is generally the verb and the job is the position or the vocation, and work is possible as substantive. I have a lot of work. Okay, very good example. So here the verb is to work, and remember the suffix er is typically the person, painter, and here we have the worker, but sometimes it's irregular and it's or. So that's the typical example of the suffix for a person, painter, number one, but the second example is a doctor or director. So the suffix is possible irregular for a worker or for a profession. Also you can have electrician, magician. So there's three possible suffixes for professions and for jobs that are very common. Okay, across the country has the significance everywhere. So I travel across the country is from one side to the other, and in this significance it means every location. So people are happy across the country, people are tired across the country. It means all around or all over the country. The next verb is very important, to cope with, and it's an idiom or a phrasal verb, to cope with, and the significance is to manage. So to manage the situation or to deal with, to manage, to deal with. So for example, how are you coping with the virus? How are you coping with the restrictions? The significance is how are you managing? How are you functioning? How are you working? How are you dealing? How are you living with the restrictions? It's possible with a person. I cannot cope with this person. And it's like tolerate. So it's very similar to tolerate. And we have another phrasal verb, to put up with. Okay, so it's possible to say the weather is very bad in Ireland, and I cannot put up with the weather means I cannot tolerate, I cannot cope, I cannot deal with the weather. So they are four significances that are very, very similar, and you can see the spelling here. So to cope is the verb, and here it's the gerund and the activity. So coping with, a new surge. So last week we explained the vocabulary to surge is like a big increase. So I take coffee and I have a surge of energy, a big increase in energy. Electricity, you have a surge of electricity. For example, now I use the computer, I use the light, I use my phone for the electricity. So it's possible we have a big surge in electricity. Typical in the football or the television, you are watching the series and everybody in the country is watching, and at the break everybody goes to the kitchen for the kettle to make the coffee. So there's a big electricity surge at the break at 6 o'clock in the television. Okay, so a surge is very, very flexible, and it is very important vocabulary and very flexible. So it's like a big increase, and in this case it's a surge in the infections. Because of the COVID, you have a surge, which is a big increase. Okay, again, ER is the suffix that's typical for the person. So it's possible a painter, it's possible a worker, and in this case it's possible a founder. So a founder is from the verb to find. You look and you find, but the founder is maybe the person who creates the company, or creates the idea, or creates the business. That is the founder. Okay, so the founder is the person of an online cookery group. So again, the verb is to cook, the substantive is a cook, and cookery is possible adjective as well. Okay, so it's a difficult adjective, cookery. Here we have the modal verb could help. So how she could help, and remember, could is possibility. So how is it possible for her to help? But remember, the big rule, after the modal verb, the next verb after the modal verb is the infinitive. But remember, infinitive is to eat, to drink, to go. But the rule after modal, eliminate to. Always, always, always eliminate to after the modal. And this is a common mistake, and I hear this error all the time. I think yesterday we spoke with somebody on the phone in the class, and there was another example of the modal and the next verb. It's necessary to eliminate to, and here the next verb is to help, but because it's a modal could, we eliminate to. Okay, the next verb is launch, and last week we explained the verb to launch again, and I hope you remember. So to launch is similar in pronunciation with lunch, but it's completely different. So the similar verb is lunch, and obviously this is related to food, and it's normally possible have lunch. With food and breakfast and dinner, we say have breakfast, have dinner, have lunch. Typically in English we say have. So it is possible, the verb to lunch, it's possible, but it's a little more advanced. Number one, we normally say to have lunch, to have dinner, to have breakfast. Okay, so I'm going to put here to explain and to write. So normally we say to have lunch and to have dinner, to have breakfast. They are the most common situations, but the verb to launch is completely different with the A. So one small difference with the letter, but the significance is completely different. And the number one example is the rocket. You know, the company NASA, or NASA, the space company. So you have the rocket and you launch the rocket. So to launch is tirar in Espanol. In Portuguese maybe similar, in other languages I'm not sure, Romanian or Thai. And launch is like to throw the rocket or to send the rocket. But we use launch as a metaphor in relation to your business. It's possible to launch your business, your book. If you write a book, you can launch your book. If you are a singer and you record an album or you record a disc, you can launch your music. Or your career, you can launch your career. So it's a significance to start. Very important, very common in conversation. And it's possible as well a launch party. And the significance is the party to celebrate the start of the book, the party to celebrate the start of your career. It's a launch party. Okay, and then the typical combination is failure to launch. That's a typical expression. And I think there's maybe a movie, or in books it's possible the expression, the verb to fail, which is fallar, but to fail to launch, and the substantive is a failure to launch. Okay, so very important vocabulary, and here failure is the noun. Good. So remember, fail is the verb for the exam, fail your exam, but the substantive is a failure, and that's just the difference between the verb and the substantive. Okay, super. And the next word I'm going to show you, I'm going to go back to the top, okay, and launch the movement. So in this case, the movement is like the campaign or the project. So you can launch the campaign, you can launch the project, and you can launch the movement. And the significance is to create and to start the project, okay? The next example is a phrasal verb. So they is the subject. Often, again, the pronunciation of the T is theoretically silent, and the rule, the T is silent, so the correct pronunciation is often. So they, and that's the adverb, okay? So they is the subject pronoun, often is the adverb, do is the verb, rounds is the preposition. And the significance of do is for an activity. The difference between do and make is very important. Do is an activity, do the homework, do the exercise, and make is typical creation, make the bed, make the cake, make money. Okay, so do and make is very important, but there is an expression with do and rounds. Very, very important. So imagine the situation with milk, and the man or the woman that delivers the milk or the newspaper, the man or the woman that delivers the newspaper, they need to go round the houses, this house, next house. So to do the rounds has the significance to visit everybody. At Christmas, it's typical and important to visit your family. So we live here, but on Christmas Day, we do the rounds. So we visit everybody. So the significance to do rounds is to visit everybody in relation to work, in relation to promotion, in relation to social family situations. So here, it's in relation to the people making the food, and they visit the workers and give the food. So very simple explanation, but a little tricky to really understand, okay? Gear. So gear, again, is a flexible word. In relation to football, you have your gear. Your gear is your jersey, your socks, your shorts, your football boots. That's your gear, okay? It's similar to equipment. So gear and equipment is very, very similar. And I'm going to write here, gear and equipment. But also gear is related to the car. So you could say first gear, second gear, mancha. No, not maybe mancha in Espanol, something similar, but gear is for the car. First gear, second gear, third gear, fourth gear, fifth gear, okay? And in relation to metaphor for life, this morning you are in second gear because it's only 10 o'clock and you are very tired, so you are not functioning perfect, so you are in second gear. And at 4 o'clock you have lots of energy, you have lots of coffee, and you are in fifth gear. So it's very typical in conversation in relation to this situation that you're feeling, your motivation, your performance. You're in first gear, which is very slow, second gear a little slow, third gear better, fourth gear good, fifth gear the best, okay? And also we have a verb to gear yourself for the situation, has the significance to prepare. Okay, so the verb to gear yourself is to prepare. So my friend wants to tell me some news. My friend says, Brian, can you meet me tomorrow? I want to tell you something. So I'm very nervous, I'm very worried, I'm afraid of the news. So I need to prepare myself. I need to gear myself for the news. I think it's related to the car, because in your brain you need to prepare, you need to move. But it is possible to gear yourself for the situation, to prepare yourself for the situation, okay? And also there's an expression to get yourself in gear, okay? So to put yourself or to get yourself, remember get is like become, so to get yourself in gear has the significance to be prepared and to be ready to move. Typical in the morning, the parent says to the child, get yourself in gear. And the significance is prepare, be ready. Because in the car, you need to be first gear and then go. So there is an expression to get yourself in gear. And again, it's similar to products. So again, I order on the internet, I order a product, and tomorrow the gear will arrive, the products or the equipment, okay? Hardly. So hardly is very important, and be careful because maybe it's a false friend, because everybody understands hard, and the significance of hard is difficult. The class is hard, the class is difficult. It's possible a hard person If you have a hard woman or a hard man, the significance is a very strong or a very tough. So the pronunciation of the word tough is very important. Tough, again, GH. So the G here, the pronunciation is like F. So tough is very strong. A tough day, a very difficult day. A tough person, a very mentally strong person. And a tough situation, a difficult situation. So tough is very, very good vocabulary. And a hard man or a hard woman is the adjective, all adjectives. But hardly is completely different. Okay, hardly is the adverb, because you can see ly, and the significance in Spanish and Portuguese is maybe casi nunca, casi nadie, similar. Okay, one example. So I have hardly spoken to my friend. So normally I speak regularly, normally I speak frequently with my friend, but because of the pandemic, now I have almost not spoken to my friend. So hardly has the significance of almost not. Okay, so very, very common, very fluent, very native expression, and very important. And it's used in other verbs. For example, running. Today I exercise at 6 o'clock, but maybe I only exercise for 2 minutes. So really I hardly exercise. I almost do not exercise. So this is completely different from I exercise hard. And you exercise hard means a lot of work. So you need to be very, very careful with this word. It's very sensitive and a little delicate, and you need to be very, very careful. Okay. So here, they can, remember, is the modal verb for ability. They can hardly sit down. So the meaning is they almost cannot, in the negative, they almost cannot sit down to eat a normal way because they are working in the ambulance. But they are cakes, something they, subject they. Can is the modal verb for ability. The verb is to take, but remember the rule after the modal is to eliminate to, so it's possible can take. So they can take. Preposition for the road is on the road, because on is typical for surface, on the table, on the wall, on the body, on the face, the road, on the road. And it's possible to say I am on the road, and the significance is I am on my way. Okay, I am traveling. If I am on the road, there's two possibilities: literal, physical, I am on the road, but the second significance, you are traveling. Okay, so I am on the road has the significance I am on the way, which has the significance I am traveling. Okay, so there's a good example of the prepositions, and the delicacy of English sometimes is important. Okay, good. So the next page, we will continue to the next page, and here oh well, okay, so maybe that's sufficient for today, just for the explanation for the grammar. Okay, so we can close this page and we can close this document, and now I want to show you some exercises in relation to the grammar. This page is very, very good, and it's in relation to the British Council, and they have a grammar section dedicated to intermediate and upper intermediate. So you can see the list here on the page, and they have different topics on the left. So for example, the first topic, you can choose a lesson, and the first topic is the difference between as and like. And in my video section on the page, I have explained the different grammar sections, and you can see in my video section the explanation for as and like is number 1. The second explanation is enough. So when we use enough, that's very important. The third example is the difference between in spite of, despite, although, even though, and though. That's also very important. So this page is very good for the explanations in relation to grammar, and I'm going to show you here the page. The next one is the difference between just, yet, still, and already. But today I want to show you the difference between used to and the infinitive, be used to or get used to. Okay, so I'm going to show you 3 examples. For example, I used to plus infinitive is number 1. The second example is I am used to plus the ing, and the third example is I get used to plus the ing. So they are the three important examples that I want to show in the explanation. The first one, I used to, with the infinitive, is an activity you did in the past. For example, I used to go to the cinema. I used to meet my friend. An activity you did in the past, but today no more. Okay, because of the pandemic, I used to visit my friend, but today it's not possible. That's the significance of used to. Okay, the second example is very, very different with the verb to be, okay, and the ing. So I am used to staying at home. So because of the pandemic, you are used to, and the significance is accustomed to, and you are used to eating at home, you are used to the restrictions, you are used to going to the shop with a mask, and this significance is you are accustomed or you are familiar with doing the activity. So that's the second explanation and the second rule. And the third rule is with the verb get used to, okay? And the significance is the process or become. So at the beginning it was difficult, but now you have got used to the situation. You have become transformed with the process, accustomed to the situation. So there's three different structures. There's a small little difference between the three, and that's just a basic explanation between the three. And now I want to show you some exercises, because this page is very good. They provide some really good exercises and also an explanation. So the first part is the explanation, and you can see the example. Do you know the difference between I used to drive on the left? So that's one example, I used to drive on the left. And the second example, I am used to driving on the left. So what is the difference? Remember, the first one, used to and infinitive, is something you did regularly in the past, but now no. Okay, and the second one is with the verb to be, and used to has the significance accustomed. So there's a little difference between the two, and a very important example. Okay, and here is the grammar exercises. So now it's a good opportunity to try the grammar. And I'm going to make the page a little bigger so everybody can see, and we can try the exercises together. So during the comments, during the class, if you want to comment in the Facebook page, if you want to select your answer and you want to type your answer, that's a good possibility. Okay, she is the subject, in is the preposition, the bank is the location, the bank, the shop, and but is the connection. She is the subject again. The verb is to leave, como dejar en español. And you can hear my amazing dog. I'm going to show you the picture. So he's very, very loud, and I think all the neighbours can probably hear him. So he's a great dog, very nice, but very, very loud. Okay, so hopefully he will not disrupt too much. So the verb to leave is in relation to departure, and remember it's irregular. So I leave in the present, and the past I left. And got is to obtain. Remember, the verb to get is to obtain in the present, and the past is irregular. So I got a job, and remember the difference between work and job. As is very important for your profession. So you work as a doctor, you work as a teacher. This is very important for a mistake, because it's a very important error. And when you say I work as is very important. I work as a doctor, I work as a nurse, I work as a teacher. Okay, so it's the past. She left and got a job in the bank. So do you think it's she used to work in a bank, she used to working, or she got used to work in a bank? For me, number 3 is possible. She got used to work, but remember the rule is get used to plus the ing. But in conversation, in reality, it's not so strict, and it is possible to say in conversation, I got used to work. Technically it's wrong. Technically it should be get used to ing, get used to working. But in conversation, and probably very common, it is possible. But theoretically and grammatically it's not correct. So here, for this reason, it has to be the infinitive. She used to work. It's something she did regularly in the past, but not now. Okay, I think that's the answer for number 1. And remember, used to is necessary with the infinitive. Used to go. If you have the verb to be, I am used to, it's possible the ing. But the second example, there is no verb to be. So the second example is not possible. Okay, the next rule. Since we had the baby, I something much sleep. So remember the difference between since and from. Usually there is a big difference between since and from. Since is one moment in the past, since 8 o'clock, since this morning, since we had the baby, one moment in the past. But from is typically two situations, from 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock, from this morning to now. So that's really the difference between since and from. And here, since we had the baby, I something much sleep. And remember, sleep is not possible to count. One sleep, two sleeps, not really. And for this reason we say much, because it's uncountable. Okay, so I'm not used to get much sleep. I have got used to not getting much sleep. I used to get much sleep. A little difficult, and the second example is obviously quite long. So since we had the baby, so what do you think is the correct answer? Number 1, 2 or 3? Remember, used to with the verb to be, am used to, it's necessary the ing. So it's necessary am not getting. So for this reason, number 1 is not possible. Have got used to is possible, and I think that could be the correct answer because it's possible. And the third example, used to get, is possible with the infinitive, but it's something that happened in the past and not now. But in this example, it's something that's happening now. And for this reason, I think it's the second one. Okay, so that's number 2. And I think we have a comment here, and maybe that's your answer in the text. Yes, exactly. So that's a good idea to type in the text. And on Facebook Live, you can also type. The second example, how is the new job? Something it yet? Are you used to it yet? Did you used to it yet? Do you used to it yet? Okay, so here it's difficult because it's the question. So for me, one of them sounds very, very correct and one of them is perfect, but the other two are a little unusual. Okay, so the question is, how's the new job? Are you used to it yet? Did you used to it yet? Do you used to it? The first one is correct. Are you used to it? Are you accustomed? Because you have the verb to be. Are you accustomed to it? And it is the substitution for the job. And yet is the adverb in relation to time, because it means from the beginning until now, yet. So I think number 1 is probably correct. Okay, it's possible we have errors, of course. The next example, before I is the subject, retire is jubilar in Espanol. When you finish working, you retire. So before I retired is the past simple. I, again, time is uncountable. So much is necessary because it's uncountable. Much time to read. So before I retired, I used to have much time to read. I got used to have much time. I never used to have much time to read. So the first one is possible, but in the context of the sentence, it's not correct because he was working and working and working. So the logical answer is he never had time to read. So because of the logic of the sentence, it's necessary the negative. Okay, I never used to have. That's a little difficult, and this exercise is a little difficult, and the correct answer here, I think, is number 3. Okay, here's the next example. So the pronunciation is important of the G, the engine. Okay, the G is important. The engine noise, that's the subject. Was is the verb, and deafening is the adjective. So remember, the adjective is deaf. When the person is not possible to hear, they are deaf. Okay, and blind is when the person cannot see. So deaf is related to hearing and listening. When you do not have the ability to hear, you are deaf, and that's important vocabulary. So here the verb is also to deafen, and remember the suffix en is also possible, the verb. We have a lot of verbs with the suffix en, to darken, to lighten, to soften, to brighten. There are a lot of verbs in relation to the suffix en, and you can say to darken, to soften, to lighten, and that is important. And here it's to deafen. So the noise does the activity, the action to you to make you not hear. So the aeroplane deafens me. So I cannot hear because of the aeroplane. So it's the verb, okay? And here is the adjective. But the driver, that's the subject, the driver. But also remember, in the bus, you have the driver. The car, you have the driver. The aeroplane, you have the pilot. Okay, so that's a very important confusion, and people confuse this a lot. The car, the bus, you have the driver. The aeroplane, you have the pilot. For the boat, you have the captain or the sailor. And for the train, you have the driver. Okay, so train driver, bus driver, but aeroplane pilot, and bus captain or boat captain or boat sailor. Okay, so I'll just write that vocabulary so you're clear. So we have, and I'm going to move here. So you have the driver of the car and the bus, or the train. Okay, the train driver. And for the plane, you have the pilot. And for the boat, I think we have the captain. Yeah, captain or the sailor. And there's another example of the suffix. Normally it's ER for the person, but in this situation it's irregular OR, like the doctor or director. Okay, so here we have the trainer. Train, sorry. Yeah, that's the confusion. So the example, but the driver, something it. So it is the noise. Was used to noise, that's possibility. Used to it, maybe. Didn't used to it. For me, one of them is very, very clear, and the other two are a little strange. So I hope you have the correct answer, and I think the correct answer is number 1, because the other two definitely sound a little strange to begin. And we have 3 more. Our house, so that's the pronunciation of the OU for the accent. Our, sometimes it's very strong in Ireland. And there's another example, OU. Our house is on. So hill is like the mountain. You have a big mountain, but a small version is the hill. And the typical preposition is on, because it's the surface. The same with the mountain. You can say on the mountain. Because it's a surface, it's on. Steep. This adjective is very, very important. Okay, so here we have the article. It's the indefinite article for the substantivo or the noun, which is the hill, but we also have the adjective. And steep is very important in English, and it's a little advanced, and it's typical for the mountain. So imagine the mountain, the inclination is very great. It's a very great inclination, so it's very steep. Okay, so you are in Ireland, and the cliff, I forget the translation in Spanish, but the cliff is very steep, so it's very dramatic inclination. But we use this in relation to a metaphor for prices. You go to the restaurant, and the restaurant is very steep. It's very expensive. So steep is possible as a metaphor for expensive. Okay, that's the significance as well. It's also possible with experience. If you are very experienced in medicine, you are steeped with experience. You are steeped with history. For example, Brazil is steeped in history. It has a deep, deep, deep history. Okay, steeped in history is possible. Steep is possible expensive. And the final example, which is very typical in conversation, is lucky. You are steeped. That's very typical in conversation. The significance, you are very lucky. So if you are steeped, the significance is very, very lucky or very fortunate. Okay, very typical in conversation. So here, our house is on a steep hill, but as something that's substantive after a month of living here. I get used to, but remember it's probably the past. So I think get is not possible because the sentence is in the past after a month of living here. Got used to is possible because it's the past, and here I used to is usually with the infinitive. So I think the second example is probably correct. Okay, 2 more. Don't worry, you will used to live in the city centre. You'll get used to living. Okay, that's definitely a possibility. Or you'll get used to live. In reality, in conversation, the second and the third are probably possible in conversation. You can hear people say the 2 in conversation, but technically there is one correct answer. So in reality, in conversation, it's possible the 2, but in the correct answer is you will get used to living. Okay, and then the final one, when we were at university. It's possible two prepositions. You can say at university for location. You can say in university. So there are two possibilities here for the prepositions: at university, in university. We have to is obligation. Write an essay a week. We got used to, but remember, get used to is the ing. So we got used to writing would be correct. But here we have the infinitive, and for this reason it's necessary just used to with the infinitive. One action you did regularly in the past but not today. So for that reason it's used to with the infinitive. I think we may have some errors, but let's check the answers. We could have some 8 from 8. Okay, good. So this activity is good. I like this activity because it is good for exercises, and sometimes it's very good to practice during the class. So today we had the introduction for the grammar, we had the article to analyze vocabulary and expressions, and we also had now an exercise from the grammar section. And this is the strategy, this is the technique, and probably we will continue in this with this method, and I hope it is very useful. Now it's a good opportunity to practice some speaking if you want to practice. But before we continue, remember, if you want to connect on social media, that's a possibility. And also the class is free. This is a good opportunity for me to know new people and to work and to grow. But if you want to make a contribution to me, it's possible. Thank you yesterday for 1 or 2 very nice contributions. So thank you so much for your help. This will allow me to continue working in this way. I know it's difficult at the moment with work and people have lost jobs. And my idea is this is free, absolutely. But at the same time, if you can support me, if you can help me, this will permit me and allow me to continue working in this way. And I really hope we can continue, and it will be an advantage for you. So if you want to help with maybe €1 or €2 in Spain, it's possible with Bizum as the telephone number, or Revolut. On the bottom left you have the details for the bank, and that's a possibility also. Or finally with PayPal, you can scan the code and it will direct you to support and donate and to support me. And there are the 3 or 4 options that are possible. At the top there is a website as well. So for me it's a good help, and it will allow me and permit me to continue working in this way. So thank you so much for your support. And now, if you are ready and if you want to practice some speaking, we can connect on Zoom. So I think we have 3. We have Monica, I think we have Fanny from last week, whose name is Victoria, and we spoke with Tatiella yesterday. So now is a time for some free speaking. So if you want to raise your hand and just to volunteer to participate, if you have a question in relation to grammar, or if you just want to practice some speaking, now is the good opportunity. I think in Peru it's maybe 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock in the morning, so maybe it's a good time. You are in first gear or second gear. So feel free, if you want to participate on Zoom, just raise your hand, or you can write and I can connect with you because you are mute at the moment. But if you want to participate, just raise your hand in the Zoom. Okay. If not, no problem. We can continue with the class tomorrow. But as I said, now is the opportunity. And if you want to join, finally, if you want to join the meeting, anybody on Facebook Live now, if you want to connect with the meeting, it's possible with the code here and the ID. And also in the event section of Facebook, I have the direct link for the Zoom meeting. And every morning I put the Zoom meeting code in the event of the class. Okay. So I don't think we have too many participants today. Maybe you're very tired after the class, but or maybe we can continue after we disconnect from the class from Facebook. We can probably practice a little if you want. Okay. So thank you so much, everybody. Have a great day. And on Facebook we will probably disconnect, but if you want to continue with practicing speaking, you're welcome to join on Zoom. Okay. So again, thank you so much to everybody. If you can support me, that's great.